My dad, Richard, was a man of routines, a quiet anchor in the chaotic sea that was my childhood home. He was a retired history teacher who believed in punctual dinners, perfectly mowed lawns, and the unshakable truth of historical facts. He was also the only man I ever trusted completely. That's why his death and the secret he left behind shattered the very foundation of my reality. It was a Tuesday in late October when the doctor gave us the final crushing news. The cancer had spread too fast, too aggressively. A few weeks, maybe a month if we're lucky. The oncologist had whispered to my mother, Eleanor, who stood there looking like a marble statue, cold, beautiful, and utterly still. Mom handled grief the way she handled most things, by meticulously organizing everything around it. She rearranged Dad's pill schedule, color-coded his medical files, and prepared the spare room for when the hospice nurse would arrive. She didn't cry. Not once. I, on the other hand, spent the next 3 days walking around in a fog, clinging to the mundane acts of making tea and fluffing pillows, terrified of the moment I'd have to say goodbye to my safe harbor. I was 30 years old, a successful corporate lawyer in New York, a city I loved because of its sheer distance from the suffocating predictability of my small, affluent hometown in Connecticut. Yet, here I was, back in my childhood bedroom, the pink floral wallpaper mocking my expensive degrees and high-rise apartment. The first 2 weeks were a blur of visitors, soft whispers, and the sterile smell of antiseptic wipes. Dad was mostly lucid but weak. We talked about his favorite historical figures, Lincoln, Queen Victoria, and he'd manage a small, tired smile. Everything felt normal except for the giant, screaming absence of the future. Then came the night everything changed. It was late. Probably close to 2 a.m. Mom was asleep in the guest room, exhausted from her vigilant care. I was dozing in the armchair next to Dad's bed, the low hum of the oxygen machine the only sound. I woke up suddenly because the humming had stopped. I looked at him. His eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, but there was a sharp, focused intensity in them I hadn't seen since the diagnosis. He wasn't looking at the ceiling. He was looking through it. "Elizabeth," he rasped, his voice barely a breathy whisper. I shot up, adrenaline pumping. "Dad, what is it? Do you need water? The nurse?" He shook his head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. His hand, thin and papery, reached for mine. I gently took it. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Listen to me," he urged, his gaze locking onto mine. "I don't have much time. I need to tell you something, a truth, the one thing, the one lie I couldn't carry to the grave." My heart started thumping against my ribs. I thought he was going to confess a minor infidelity from decades ago, or maybe that he'd lost a small fortune on a bad investment. Something mundane, something solvable. "Whatever it is, Dad, it's okay. You can tell me anything. I love you," I whispered, tears suddenly welling up. He closed his eyes for a long moment, gathering his strength. When he opened them, the look of terror mixed with relief was visceral. "You are not Eleanor's daughter. You are not our daughter." The words didn't register immediately. They floated in the air like confused dust motes. What, a bad dream? Delirium? "Dad, you're tired. Let me get you some water." "No." His voice was surprisingly sharp, making me flinch. "Listen." 30 years ago, St. Jude's Hospital, October 14th. You were switched. My mind raced, desperately searching for a logical explanation. Adoption? No, Mom always talked about the long, difficult labor, the specific nurse, the tiny birthmark on my left ankle. She never kept secrets, especially not something so monumental. Switched? What are you saying? Like, accidentally? At the hospital? I asked, my voice high and strained. He nodded, a tear tracking down his cheek, the first genuine raw emotion I'd seen him display in weeks. The nurses. One of them. She was angry. Eleanor was a terrible patient, demanding, arrogant, you know how she is. The nurse, she was having a bad day, a difficult marriage, financial trouble. She saw your mother's perfect life, her perfect husband, her perfect nursery, and she did something terrible. My breath hitched. She intentionally switched the babies? No, not intentionally, not exactly. He struggled to continue, his chest heaving. There were 2 girls born minutes apart. You and another baby. She mixed up the tags. She realized it almost immediately, but she panicked. She didn't say anything. She just let it happen. I was numb. It felt like standing on a floating iceberg that had just been severed from the mainland. Everything I thought I knew, my history, my DNA, my entire narrative, was a lie. How do you know this? How did you find out? The nurse. She was a former student of mine. Mary Beth. She contacted me 10 years later. She was dying of cancer, too. Said she needed to clear her conscience. She gave me the name of the family, the other baby. Told me where they lived. He was fading fast now, the light in his eyes dimming. I leaned in close, frantic to hear the rest. Where is she, Dad? Where is my real family? He squeezed my hand one last time, a whisper thin as tissue paper escaping his lips. The other girl. She was raised as Elizabeth. Her name is Emily. Then the hand went slack. The rasping stopped. The silence that followed was absolute crushing. The clock, for me, had stopped right there, at 2:17 a.m. I was no longer Elizabeth Reynolds. I was someone else. And the truth, a monstrous, life-altering secret, was mine to carry alone, at least for now. The immediate aftermath of Dad's death was a performance. I called the nurse. I called the funeral home. I let my mother wake up and perform her perfected routine of dignified, dry-eyed sorrow. I coordinated the flowers and the eulogy, all while a single, horrific sentence echoed on repeat in my skull. You are not our daughter. I couldn't mourn properly. How could I grieve the loss of the man who had just stolen my entire identity? Every tear felt like a lie. Every hug from my mother felt like a physical intrusion. The woman standing beside me, the one people kept calling my spitting image, her elegance, her sharp wit, her cold reserve, she wasn't even my biological mother. The funeral passed in a haze of black suits and whispered condolences. As soon as the last guest left, the tension between Eleanor and me became a suffocating presence in the house. She was angry that I wasn't grieving correctly. "You're too quiet, Elizabeth," she snapped one evening while polishing a silver picture frame. "Your father deserves more than this detached silence. You need to pull yourself together and manage the estate files." "The estate files can wait, Mom," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. I was holding the small, leather-bound journal Dad had kept by his bed, the one Mary Beth, the nurse, had given him. Inside, written in Dad's familiar, precise script, were the names: Emily Carter, born October 14th, Fairfield, Connecticut. I looked at Eleanor, truly looked at her for the first time since that night. She was perfect, as always. A silk robe, a pearl necklace, not a single hair out of place. This was the woman who had reportedly been so demanding, so arrogant in the delivery room, that a panicked nurse had swapped her baby out of spite or carelessness. I decided to test the waters. "Do you remember the night I was born, Mom?" She sighed, clearly irritated by the change of subject. "Of course I do." The worst 18 hours of my life, St. Jude's, that incompetent night nurse, I can't recall her name. She had such a dreadful cough. "Was her name Mary Beth?" I pressed. Eleanor paused her polishing. Her eyes, usually steely blue, flickered with something I couldn't immediately define. Was it guilt or just annoyance? Perhaps. "Why are you dredging this up, Elizabeth?" "It's morbid." I stood up, the journal clutched tightly. "Because Dad told me something just before he died, Mom." "Something about that night." Her facade cracked slightly. Her mouth thinned into a hard line. "Your father was delirious in the end, darling. He said many nonsensical things. He told me I was switched at birth." The silence in the room became absolute. The only sound was the frantic pounding in my own ears. Eleanor didn't scream. She didn't cry. She laughed. A sharp, brittle sound that offered no humor. "That is the most absurd, melodramatic thing I have ever heard," she scoffed, going back to her polishing, her movements suddenly jerky and aggressive. "That poor, sick man must have imagined it." "You look exactly like my side of the family, Elizabeth. The cheekbones, the hair color. It's nonsense." He had proof, Mom. He had the name of the nurse. She confessed to him years ago. She gave him the name of the other family. The Carters. I watched her closely. When I said Carters, her entire body went rigid. The polishing rag fell from her hand. "Richard was always too trusting," she said, her voice low and dangerous, devoid of emotion. "He was always picking up strays, believing every sob story. This is a cruel hoax, Elizabeth. A dying man's fantasy." "No, it's not," I insisted, opening the journal and pointing to the entry. "He wrote it down. He knew for years. He was protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" "From the truth that my husband was mentally unstable." She finally turned to face me, and her eyes were not just angry, they were terrified. "You will forget this immediately. You will burn that journal. You will not disrupt the peace of this family or taint your father's memory with such scandalous lunacy." "It's not lunacy. It's my life. My entire life is a fabrication because you were too demanding and a nurse made a mistake, and Dad kept the secret to keep you happy," I shouted, the words tumbling out, fueled by 2 weeks of suppressed agony. Eleanor took a step toward me, her posture that of a queen confronting a peasant. "Your father kept the secret because he loved you and he loved me, and you will show that love and respect by letting this end here. You are Elizabeth Reynolds. You are my daughter. That is the only truth that matters." She dismissed me with a wave of her hand, but I knew I had hit a nerve. Her denial was too fierce, too instantaneous. It wasn't the denial of grief, it was the denial of complicity. I retreated to my room, locking the door. I realized Dad hadn't just confessed the switch. He had confessed his own failure to act on it for 2 decades. And he had protected Eleanor, the person who probably knew or at least suspected something, and buried the truth deep within the comfortable silence of their privileged life. But now I had the truth, and I had a name, Emily Carter. That night, armed with only a city and a last name, I went to my laptop. The first search was easy: Fairfield, Connecticut, Emily Carter. The results were overwhelming, but as a lawyer, I knew how to filter. I narrowed the search to the correct age group, checking public records and social media profiles, and there she was. A picture popped up, A woman with kind eyes, a wide, genuine smile, and dark, thick hair that seemed to defy gravity. She was a kindergarten teacher, her profile filled with cheerful photos of crafts and small children. She looked nothing like me. She looked nothing like Eleanor. But there was one photograph, a family portrait from a few years ago, Emily with an older couple, and the man in the picture, Mr. Carter, had my father's sharp, intelligent eyes, only younger, more vibrant, and Mrs. Carter. Mrs. Carter had my cheekbones, my straight, fine hair, my exact mouth. The physical resemblance was so immediate and overwhelming that it took my breath away. It was like looking at a future version of myself that had chosen an entirely different path. I stared at the screen, tears finally streaming down my face. This was where I belonged. This was the life that was stolen from me, the life of a kindergarten teacher named Emily Carter. The sheer audacity of the universe had given me everything, wealth, status, an Ivy League education, but had robbed me of a fundamental truth, my own mother. And somewhere, my real daughter, Emily, was living the life of a woman who wasn't her mother either. The next step was terrifying. I had to contact her. I had to tell the Carters everything. But how do you drop a 30-year-old atomic bomb on a seemingly happy family? I spent 3 agonizing days staring at Emily Carter's Facebook profile, crafting and deleting emails that ranged from the clinical to the outright hysterical. I was a lawyer. My job was to communicate complex, difficult truths clearly. But this truth, it defied every legal and emotional precedent. Finally, I opted for a professional, almost cold approach, hoping the formality would prevent her from immediately thinking I was a scammer or a crank. I found the contact email for the school where she taught. Subject: urgent and highly confidential matter regarding your birth. I introduced myself as Elizabeth Reynolds, an attorney handling a posthumous estate matter for my father, Richard Reynolds. I stated that my father had received an affidavit concerning a potential hospital mix-up at St. Jude's Hospital in 1995, and that the details pointed specifically to her. I included no dramatic details, only the facts: the date, the hospital, and the need for a confidential conversation, and eventually a DNA test. The response came 12 hours later. It was short, polite, and deeply concerned. Ms. Reynolds, I am unnerved by this email. I don't know who you are. While I appreciate your discretion, the idea of a hospital mix-up sounds like something from a movie. I am very happy with my family. Please send any further correspondence to my father, Mr. Michael Carter. He manages all family legal affairs. She included her father's email. Emily, my biological daughter, had effectively shut me down and passed the problem to the man who was not her biological father. It was heartbreaking, but entirely understandable. Mr. Carter's response was immediate and furious. He threatened legal action if I didn't cease contact. He accused me of trying to extort money from them during a difficult time. I didn't blame him. He was defending his family. I knew threats wouldn't work. I needed proof that was irrefutable. I sent him a detailed, notarized statement outlining Dad's deathbed confession, the nurse's identity, and the exact names of the attending staff on the night of October 14th. I closed with a simple, firm offer. I will pay for a reputable third-party DNA test. You and your wife can submit samples. If the results show no relation, I will disappear from your lives forever and never speak of this again. If they show a match, we both have a profound truth to confront. The silence lasted a week. I used that time to get my own testing done, specifically with my non-biological mother, Eleanor. The results came back. 0 probability of maternal relation. I stared at the clinical report, feeling a wave of validation and an even deeper sense of displacement. I was right. The lie was real. A week later, Michael Carter finally emailed me back. "Miss Reynolds." We had to know. "For my wife, Linda. We have submitted our samples to the company you suggested. We expect the truth, nothing less. If this is a lie, you will regret this, professionally and personally. If it is true, God help us all." The waiting period felt like an eternity compressed into 10 days. I couldn't work. Eleanor continued her denial, refusing to even discuss the possibility, suggesting I was having a mental breakdown due to grief. "It's this ridiculous delusion, Elizabeth. You've let your father's last confused ramblings ruin your good sense," she'd hiss, pouring herself another glass of expensive scotch. "If I'm not your daughter, Mom, who am I once challenged her. "You are the girl I raised, the girl I paid for, the girl who bears my husband's name." "That makes you mine, regardless of genetics," she declared, cementing the cold, transactional nature of our relationship. The email with the results arrived precisely at 3 p.m. on a Friday. My hands shook as I opened the attachment. The results were a devastating symphony of scientific fact. Elizabeth Reynolds and Linda Carter, 99.999% probability of maternal relation. Elizabeth Reynolds and Michael Carter, 0% probability of paternal relation. Emily Carter and Eleanor Reynolds, 99.999% probability of maternal relation. Emily Carter and Richard Reynolds, 0% probability of paternal relation. The world tilted. The DNA confirmation was absolute. I was Linda Carter's daughter, raised by Eleanor. Emily Carter was Eleanor Reynolds' daughter, raised by Linda. My biological mother, Linda, was the quiet woman with the kind eyes and warm smile on Facebook. Eleanor had raised the woman who was genetically hers, Emily, and I, the lawyer, the one who inherited the cold, analytical demeanor, was the daughter of a kindergarten teacher and a man I had never met. I forwarded the results to Michael Carter immediately. Within an hour, my phone rang. It was Michael. His voice was not furious now, it was broken. "Oh God, Elizabeth. It's true. It's all true. She's inconsolable. 30 years of raising the ghost, and I've been living a ghost's life, Michael," I replied, my voice raspy with tears. "We need to meet. All of us." The meeting was set for a private room in a neutral hotel a week later. The tension was unimaginable. The Carters arrived first. Michael, a weary, kind-faced man. Linda, whose eyes were red and swollen, gripping her husband's hand. And Emily, who looked confused and scared, a perfect reflection of how I felt. I walked in with Eleanor. She insisted on coming not out of maternal solidarity, but out of some twisted sense of proprietorship. "I need to manage this crisis," she declared. The air was thick with unsaid trauma. 2 couples, 2 daughters, all gathered to deal with a monumental, life-altering truth. Linda Carter looked at me, her biological daughter, and started to weep silently. Eleanor looked at Emily, her biological daughter, with an expression of cold, clinical appraisal. Then Michael Carter spoke, his voice heavy with grief and anger. 30 years ago, your wife, Eleanor Reynolds, was so demanding at that hospital, so arrogant she caused a chain reaction of carelessness and secrecy that ruined 2 families. Eleanor stood up, her jaw set. We need to stop with the accusations. We are here to discuss a solution, not to assign blame to a grieving widow." "A solution?" Linda Carter finally whispered, looking at Eleanor with raw hatred. "My daughter was taken from me because you acted like royalty. And you had the truth for 2 decades, and you did nothing." The meeting quickly devolved into chaos, a whirlwind of grief, blame, and the desperate realization that no solution could fix 30 years of lost time. The initial meeting was a disaster, a clash of classes and emotional styles. Eleanor saw the Carters as a problem to be managed. The Carters saw Eleanor as the root of their lifelong pain. I saw Emily, my biological daughter, raised by the woman who raised me, and felt a terrifying mix of profound connection and utter foreignness. Emily, who had always believed herself to be a Carter, was the most shell-shocked. She was a woman built on routine and simplicity, a kindergarten teacher, warm, nurturing, utterly unlike the cool, reserved lawyer I was. Now, she was grappling with the fact that her biological mother was Eleanor Reynolds, the Ice Queen, the woman who had already openly dismissed her. The weeks that followed were a confusing, messy dance of tentative bonding. I started spending time with Linda and Michael Carter. My biological mother, Linda, was everything Eleanor was not. Tactile, loud, openly affectionate. She cooked for me, huge, comforting Italian meals, and cried every time she looked at me, mourning the 30 years she lost. Michael, my biological non-father, for he had raised me, genetically speaking, as Emily's father, was cautious but welcoming. He told me stories about their humble beginnings, their struggles, the life of simplicity I might have had. It was jarring. I, who was used to silent, formal dinners and intellectual discussions, was suddenly immersed in a world of loud laughter, spilled wine, and genuine, unedited emotion. I craved it, yet felt perpetually out of place. I found myself instinctively correcting Linda's grammar or critiquing Michael's investment choices, old habits of the Reynolds upbringing dying hard. Meanwhile, Emily was struggling to connect with Eleanor. Eleanor, in her own twisted way, was attempting to forge a relationship with her biological daughter, treating the endeavor like a project. She bought Emily expensive designer clothes, offered to pay off her student loans, and tried to mold her into the society daughter she always wanted. "You have my bone structure, darling," Eleanor had told Emily during an awkward, forced lunch. "But we simply must do something about that hair color. And those dreadful polyester skirts, Emily hated it." She was suffocated by Eleanor's wealth and her relentless critique. She sought comfort back in the simple, unconditional love of Linda and Michael, the parents who raised her. "I feel like I'm auditioning for a role I never wanted," Emily confessed to me during a tearful phone call. "She's not a mother, Elizabeth. She's an editor. She sees me and only sees flaws that need fixing I understood instantly. Eleanor was incapable of simple, unconditional love. She could only love a version of you that met her exacting standards." The real tension flared when Eleanor realized I was becoming attached to the Carters' world. She saw my visits to their modest home as a betrayal. "You are making a mockery of your father's memory," she accused one morning. "You are a Reynolds. You belong here, in this house, with the name and the legacy we gave you. Those people are beneath us, Elizabeth. They are exploiting your grief for their own sentimentality." "They are my family, Mom," I retorted, the title feeling more real with Linda than it ever had with her. "Linda is my mother, and Michael is the man who should have raised me." Eleanor's tactics escalated from verbal attacks to outright sabotage. She began subtly interfering with my professional life, calling senior partners at my firm and expressing deep concern about my mental stability following my father's death and my current unfortunate fixation on a false narrative. She tried to turn the tables on the Carters legally. She hired a high-powered attorney to send them a cease and desist letter, demanding they stop harassing me and spreading libelous claims about the hospital switch, threatening to sue them for defamation unless they cut all ties with me and Emily. This was the last straw for Michael Carter. He was a good man, but he was tired of being stepped on. He called me, his voice shaking with contained rage. "Your mother is trying to shut us down, Elizabeth. She's trying to erase the truth your father finally confessed. We don't have her money for a legal fight. We will lose Emily to her if we keep this up." That night, I confronted Eleanor with the cold, hard logic she understood best. I walked into the living room, placed a thick binder of legal documents on the coffee table, and looked her straight in her calculating eyes. "You will stop this now, Eleanor. I have been compiling evidence for weeks. I have the DNA confirmation, I have Mary Beth's signed affidavit, and I have the original birth records showing the two births minutes apart and the shift change records. If you pursue this lawsuit, I will not only defend the Carters pro bono, but I will file a lawsuit against you for fraudulent misrepresentation and emotional distress, detailing your knowledge and willful concealment of the truth for 2 decades. Eleanor paled. The legal threat coming from her own daughter, who was also a corporate shark, was the one thing that broke through her iron will. She looked at me, not with maternal warmth, but with grudging respect for a worthy opponent. "You've learned your lesson well, Elizabeth," she murmured, her voice laced with venom. "You have your father's weakness for sentimentality, but you have my killer instinct." She finally agreed to back off, but her concession was cold. "You may keep your Carters, but you will not bring that commonness into this house, and you will never, ever call Linda mother in my presence." I had won the battle for access, but the war for my identity was far from over. I was a Reynolds in training, a Carter by blood, and a completely confused woman caught between 2 impossibly different worlds. I was starting to realize that the switch hadn't just changed our parents, it had irrevocably changed who we were. And the final shocking piece of the puzzle was still missing, the one that explained why Dad had kept the secret for so long, and whether Eleanor was truly as innocent as she claimed. Despite the cessation of Eleanor's legal attacks, the emotional damage lingered. I was officially a Carter by blood and a Reynolds by upbringing, yet I felt neither fully belonged in either world. I continued to visit Linda and Michael, slowly adapting to their chaos and warmth, but always leaving with the sinking feeling that I was only a visitor in the life that should have been mine. My focus returned to the missing piece of the puzzle. Why did Dad wait until his deathbed? Why did Mary Beth, the nurse, confess to him, a former high school teacher, and not to the hospital administration or the police? I decided to reread Dad's journal, the small leather-bound book he'd kept hidden. I went over the entry where he detailed Mary Beth's confession, searching for nuances I had missed. The entry was dated 2005. 10 years after my birth. He wrote about Mary Beth, her terminal diagnosis, and her need to clear her conscience. He wrote about the switch, the panic, the fear of losing her job. But then I noticed a separate, heavily underlined sentence tucked away near the bottom of the page, written almost as an afterthought. She said E told her to wait. E. Eleanor. I felt a cold dread grip me. This wasn't just a nurse's mistake. This was a deliberate choice, possibly involving my non-biological mother. I went back further in the journal to an entry from 1995, shortly after the births. It was a cryptic note. E says it's better this way. Perfect pedigree, no risk. The pieces clicked into a terrifying mosaic. I knew Eleanor was arrogant and demanding, but I never thought she was capable of such cold-blooded manipulation. I went to the family safe and retrieved my original birth certificate. The hospital name, the date, my mother's name, Eleanor Elizabeth Reynolds. I then did a search I should have done years ago, the Carter family history. Michael Carter was a simple man, a hard-working foreman, but his wife, Linda Carter, had a complicated past. She had suffered a severe, debilitating medical condition in her early 20s that made her pregnancy extremely high risk. I found archived medical reports and newspaper clippings detailing her difficult labor, coinciding with my birth. Linda Carter was high risk. Eleanor Reynolds was not. The terrifying truth unfolded. Eleanor hadn't just been demanding in the delivery room, she'd been calculating. She wanted a perfect, uncomplicated, blue-chip baby. Linda's difficult medical history, which could potentially lead to health complications for her baby, was likely known among some of the nurses. I confronted Eleanor one final time, not with threats, but with the full, devastating picture of her selfishness. "The hospital was talking, wasn't it, Mom?" I asked, holding the journal and the cryptic note. "You weren't just upset about a messy room. You heard whispers about Linda Carter's complicated medical background. And when Mary Beth panicked after the switch, you saw an opportunity." Eleanor stared into the fireplace, sipping her tea, her composure finally starting to waver. "Mary Beth realized the switch immediately, but you didn't let her correct it," I pressed, my voice shaking with disgust. "You told her to wait. You told her it was better this way because Emily, your biological daughter, was the baby of a high-risk pregnancy, and I was the healthy one, the safer bet. You switched the risk, Mom. You took the healthy baby, and you gave the Carters the baby you feared would be medically fragile." Eleanor finally turned, her eyes glittering with cold tears. "I needed certainty, Elizabeth. I needed a healthy heir. Our lineage, our standing, it demanded perfection. The Carter woman's child, she was a gamble. You were a sure thing. Your father agreed it was safer for the family image." "Dad agreed?" I whispered, the final blow landing. My anchor, my safe harbor, had been complicit in the cover-up for two separate reasons. He had known the switch was intentional, or at least willfully concealed, not just accidental. He protected the lie not only to keep Eleanor happy, but also because he, a historian obsessed with legacy, had chosen the perfect pedigree over the messy truth. "He didn't agree initially," Eleanor sneered. "He was horrified. But I convinced him we were ensuring a stable life for both girls. You, with your inherited health and intelligence, would thrive here. And the other girl, she would thrive with parents who weren't burdened by our expectations." It was the final, sickening realization. My father's confession was not a full act of atonement. It was a half-truth. He told me the switch occurred, but he hid Eleanor's calculated role and his own complicity in prioritizing social standing over moral truth. I finally understood my birthright. It wasn't money or status. It was the burden of choice. I left the Reynolds house that day, not with anger, but with resolve. I moved out of the city and bought a small house near the Carters. I started working pro bono on legal cases for families affected by medical negligence, a quiet act of penance for the sins of the Reynolds name. I never fully severed ties with Eleanor. I saw her on holidays, keeping the peace for the sake of the complicated fused family we had become. But the warmth, the affection, belonged entirely to the Carters. Emily and I, two women who were never meant to be sisters, became exactly that. We supported each other through the trauma, the lost years, and the absurdity of our dual parentage. Emily eventually found true peace by legally changing her last name to Carter and fully embracing the life she had always known. As for me, I eventually stopped introducing myself as Elizabeth Reynolds, the lawyer. I was simply Elizabeth Linda's daughter. The story of my life was the story of two families, one defined by the icy clarity of a perfect lie, and the other by the messy, beautiful reality of unconditional love. My father had chosen the lie to protect his legacy. I chose the truth to finally save my soul. Thank you for listening to this difficult confession. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments section below.